talk to me, honey, so you can see what's going on. What's going on? Hey, what's going on? Tell me what's going on.
On behalf of Randy Hoskins, who's also known as Randy White, to announce that we have filed a notice of claim on his behalf against the County of Nassau, Nassau County Police Department, elected officials, and the Department of Corrections, that being the Sheriff's Department. The reason why this is being done is it is a precursor to a lawsuit. There is no mystery here that Mr. White, who was abused, intends to try and to protect his rights and seek some justice after levels of injustice were leveled against him. One of the things that you'll find in this notice of claim in the actual caption is that we refer to a number of John Does, 1 through 10, 11 through 20, and 21 through 30. Part of what was claimed here, that there is a conspiracy that took place, and that in this situation that Randy was the victim of a conspiracy which took place. Someone had to make the calls to start this ball rolling, and the fact that the district attorney's office has failed to appropriately and completely investigate this is creating a major problem with regard to the level of trust and confidence in the major prosecutor here in Nassau County. It's for that reason that this morning we filed with the U.S. Attorney's Office, Loretta Lynch's office, and I spoke with him this morning, a letter which requests that they take a careful look, conduct a probe, and evaluate this case and the other levels of abuses that have occurred in Nassau County. Particularly important in this letter is the fact that we raise a number of questions which address what the district attorney's office did not address. We raise questions about the questions that they did not ask. We raise questions about the issues which they did not look into. And we raise particular questions about particular issues of law, that being charges that were not brought against individuals in the Nassau County Police Department, the higher-ups, that should have been considered and brought and were not. We understand that there is a political quagmire going on in Nassau County, Democrats and Republicans. And one of the things that we're here to say is it doesn't make a difference. If you're wrong, you're wrong. And we are at this point asking for the U.S. Attorney's Office to come in and sort this thing out, because we believe that Kathleen Rice should not have investigated this matter in the first place. She has her own political aspirations and concerns, and she should have at least asked for the appointment of a special prosecutor, or asked the U.S. Attorney's Office to come in and take a look at this. There is a major concern that we have here, and on behalf of Randy and on behalf of his father, Mr. Hoskins, we are asking the U.S. Attorney's Office to take a careful look at this and evaluate this. And I'll ask you to take a close look at this letter because it points out some very detailed facts that you want to know. At this point, I'm going to ask Randy to make a statement. I'll finish up with any other statements or questions that you may have. Randy, hold on for a second.
I believe I was abused. I was kind of tortured mentally that day I was pulled off the bus, and I just want any justice brought down on the officers that had something to do with taking place in the conspiracy and bringing me down on that Saturday where I got on the bus. It could have happened to anybody, who got caught up in a political scandal such as I did, and I just want justice brought down anybody who had any possibility to do with my case.
As a closing point, his father, Rasan Hoskins, will take questions as well as myself, but as a closing point, we point out to you that we provided you with a copy of Ms. Rice's 4-page letter, which if you look at that with any careful evaluation, you will see that there are so many holes in that letter that anybody, now I'm talking about a first-year law student, would have to look at that very carefully and say, something is amiss here. Additionally, we put in from this very well-known and reputable newspaper an investigative study that they did about things which are going wrong within the County of Nassau Police Department, which is emblematic of what's going on at the highest levels of that department. The fact that the commissioner, the chief of detectives, and other high-ranking individuals got a chance to walk away from this scot-free thus far is absurd, and it's an absolute abomination. And we're calling for some action to be taken by the U.S. Attorney's Office as well as any other offices that have the authority to do so. Questions?
How high up do you think this goes? I mean, does this go to the county executive?
We don't know for a fact that it goes to the county executive, but one of the things that's very clear is that someone had to have the ability to get to the highest law enforcement officer in the county, and for that individual to take action, that being the commissioner and the chief of detectives, to take action, a call had to come from someone that was above them, and there's very few people that are above them. We are suggesting that the questions which need to be asked have not been asked appropriately nor fully by the individuals that should be asking those questions.
Where was your client when the papers were served on him, when that civil action? Was he in jail or was he in the police headquarters?
He was at headquarters, he was at the at headquarters in Mineola.
Okay, so what's this about the jail? Why was he taken to the
I'm
jail?
so glad you asked that question. There's someone that's reading.
He didn't set it up.
Here's a question. Normally, when an individual is brought into custody on a warrant, they're an overnight guest at headquarters. What they did with Randy was they took him out, segregated him from the other people that were in lockup, took him in a vehicle over to the jail, subjected him to all types of inhumane treatment, including cavity searches, placed him in an orange jumpsuit to make him feel as though all of his property and well-being was being taken away from him, to scare this young man. And then they brought him to court the next morning. Everybody else, according to what Randy says, that was in the lockup at headquarters stayed there. He was pulled out. And it's just unspeakable that you would take a person on a $250 or lacking of paying a fine warrant to the jail, put him in oranges, take him through the closet where he's strip searched, just to bring him back to jail the next morning. That doesn't make any sense. Something is wrong here. And people can't get away with just simply saying, oh, it's okay, or we're just going to forgive them for this. In this situation, yeah, we understand that police have a job to do, but they don't have the right to abuse individuals like they abused Randy.
Would any conversations occur between the time he was taken from headquarters and to the jail, and from the jail to court? Was he questioned by Sal Mazzaretta, or were there any conversations going on there?
If I may answer your question, there were conversations, there were issues raised by police officers which made it very clear to Randy that this was all about the court case. And I'm not going to get into the particulars because at some point I'm anticipating that there will be testimony either before a grand jury or another governmental body.
But those questions were after he was taken from headquarters to the jail and before he was taken to court.
There was conversation throughout.
Right.
Mr. Brogdon, could you just kind of summarize for us briefly the genesis of this? Your client was a campaign worker for a Mr. Hardwick. Could you just kind of pick it up there and just give us a little background here about where this started?
Let me put it this way. Mr. Hoskins White was approached by campaign workers from the Hardwick campaign to initially sign petition. He was then asked to be involved in collecting signatures, being paid to do that work. That issue has already been settled in court, that he has testified to the fact that he was paid per signature and not for the time that he was collecting signatures. As he went through that process and collected the signatures, he turned them in, he got his remuneration. There came a time when the Democratic Party challenged the petitions of the Independence Party. Those were the Independence Party petitions of Mr. Hardwick. One of the questions that came up was whether or not those signatures were collected legally. Mr. Hoskins, Mr. White, Randy White, was then asked to testify in this case, And when he did testify, he testified truthfully as to what occurred, and what he understood was the relationship between himself and the Hardwick campaign. After testifying, individuals came to his home from the Hardwick campaign, suggesting that they needed to speak to him, almost bullying their way into the house through his father. And then shortly thereafter, when his father dropped him off at the bus stop to catch the bus going in toward Hempstead, the bus was stopped. Those individuals, we understand, had something to do with this. And we also understand that at that time when he was pulled off the bus, there was a direct relationship made as to whether or not he was having some problem politically. So in this situation, Sean, that is the genesis of this whole underlying problem. And the fact that the commissioner of police, the chief of detectives, and other high-ranking individuals, including an off-duty sergeant, came to the headquarters at 9 o'clock at night, tells us that this is not the run-of-the-mill process, and this is just not a deployment of resources. That's different. A deployment of resources doesn't mean you call in the chief of detectives or you call in high-ranking individuals to handle someone on a $250 warrant. Something's wrong. And we just can't allow that to happen. If this were somebody else or Joe Blow in the neighborhood, they'd have the entire book thrown at them. But these individuals get a chance to just walk away and say, oh, my bad, not acceptable. That's what the genesis of this is about.
Could you take an educated guess as to why a district attorney, a Democrat, why she wouldn't want to properly investigate this? Because that you're alleging this investigation was not a proper one, her investigation. Why? What would be her reasoning?
Well, I'm glad that you asked for an educated guess, because my educated guess is that there appear to be political concerns that would require someone that has aspirations to leave the district attorney's office to take actions that would otherwise will be contrary to their sworn duty. And I say that thinking that in this situation, if anyone looks at this with an eye toward whether or not there was any wrongdoing, any criminal wrongdoing, it does not take much to take a process forward in terms of a potential grand jury evaluation, no less just a regular legal evaluation. So my view here is that there is much to be gained by not creating more enemies than are necessary through this process. And that's as close as I can get to an educated guess. I don't have the facts yet to fully back that up. And notice that I do say yet. We are asking for and we are suggesting that full investigations take place, that whether or not it's the legislature, whether or not it's the assembly, whether or not it's Mr. Schneiderman or the U.S. Attorney's Office, as we've asked, someone needs to put the hard, tough questions to these elected and appointed officials and make them answer for their actions. If we don't, we're going to be living with an entire barrel of rotten apples, because that's essentially what we have here. We have something that went terribly wrong, and nobody's doing anything about it. Yes?
You said earlier those individuals had